Well, welcome back to another week of our live streaming event where we are going to be talking about the next level of physical transformations. As just a quick recap, over the last year, I've been working really hard to take myself from overweight and overwhelmed at around 240 pounds while I was traveling the world with my beautiful wife. And you can see kind of where we started last year. And over time, I started to drop some pounds through just regular diet and exercise to the point where I have gotten down to about 180 pounds, so nearly 60 pounds of weight loss. And I did this just through being consistent over a long period of time with my plans, and also from the wonderful help of my community, my wife, and my fitness coach, who's going to help me through the next portion of this transformation. He's agreed to come on here through a series of weekly presentations to kind of talk about the next portion of our transformation. And so, without further ado, I bring to you Mr. Alim Shabazz with Big Tire Bootcamp and Strong AF. Alim,
Hey,
welcome, brother.
Danny. Hey, thank you. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the motivation and the work that you've been doing. We've been getting some terrific response from those that are joining in. I know our bootcamp followers are also really enjoying these sessions, and I hope that they do join us here soon because we've got some really good knowledge about to come our way uh, in this next in this particular episode, because it's about building a fitness and nutrition plan, which you've so
Yeah,
graciously kind of started developing with me to get me to this next level, because I've been stagnant at around 180 pounds for the last 3 or 4 months.
yeah, absolutely. And, just like you mentioned earlier, it's a journey. And so where you're at in your journey is going to look a little bit different than somebody else. But there are some good principle-based things we can talk about today that are evergreen no matter where you're at, that people can glean from and hopefully get some insight around that. And generally, where people get stuck is after they've done all the things that kind of I call low-hanging fruit, and they're kind of doing what's called cookie cutter things, and they're just spinning their wheels. And that's really the emphasis that I want to make today is everything we're going to talk about has literally been built around Danny as in the center. So you might hear or see some things that you might think like, well, I don't think I would do that, or this may not work for me. And that might be very true. But keep in mind that we've come to this point from a series of questions, a series of interviews, and a series of back and forths to really put something together that is unique just for Danny. But there are, like I said, lots of things in general that when we look at the principles that can apply and help a lot of people.
Well, awesome. So when you're talking about this cookie cutter formation, because that's what a lot of us turn to, right? Like we go on the internet, we look up plans, we look up ideas of what we can do, and we do our best to put it into practice, right? Like we do our best to make sure that we can um, try to equip ourselves with the best knowledge that we have. But if we're lacking some key information, we can really turn ourselves around, right? Like nutrition is a big one, and then also like doing the right workouts at the right time for your body type.
Yeah, you're so right about that. I call it snapshot fitness. A lot of times you'll see something online that just seems really great, right? So you pick that particular thing out because that person is mentioning it as a wonderful, um, a wonderful thing that will get results. But it might be taken out of context, and what you don't see is the bigger picture of why that individual might be recommending or using that particular thing. And so that would really be no different than if you looked at the landscape of anything in life, even if you looked at, let's say, just education, right? If you're in
Mm.
the second grade and you might hear something that's really cool that somebody's doing in the 10th grade, you're like, well, I'm going to go ahead and just pull this out. Well, probably a lot of steps in between where you're at and why they're doing that particular. Let's see, can you hear me? Okay.
Sorry about that. Let's
Generally,
uh,
what
let's
you
take that back.
Sure, sure. What I was saying is basically when you're looking at your the approach for things is sometimes people will see or hear something either online or get recommended by a friend, and I call it snapshot fitness. Basically, it's a small piece of a bigger puzzle, and that piece of the puzzle just may not fit in your overall puzzle, and so they might try that and either get injured or get frustrated because it doesn't quite give them the same results as somebody else. And so that's why it's important to take a comprehensive approach to your overall health and wellness and look at it for the long term. Because there is not one workout, one exercise, one rep, one meal, one type of movement that's going to be the end all be all for you. And I put that in context with what we're talking about today. As Danny gets better and stronger and leaner, this will change. So what we're setting up here today might very well look different from what we end up in the future. And that's how this is going to continue to evolve and adapt as Danny evolves and adapts.
What was wild was last year. I was in Greece. I was about 230, 240 pounds, whatever it was. And I went back to an old regime that I used to go to, which was let me prepare for a marathon because like running is just something that I know that has worked for me in the past. Unfortunately, when I went to go do my first 6 mile, 7 mile run, I ended up with like severe hip pain, hip pain that I hadn't experienced before. And so what I had learned was even though, something had worked for me in the past, my body type was just not equipped at that moment for that type of distance. And now, last Friday I went out on a makeshift run and did, just an early morning run, ran for as much time as I had, ended up being about 13.2 miles over the course of like 2.5 hours. So like I really had to adjust and pay attention to what my body was saying to me in the midst of these workouts.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. And that's being in tune with your body as well and realizing and basically working with what you've got at the moment, right? And not trying to pull things forward and guilt or shame ourselves. We were all different people 10, 20 years ago, better or worse in some situations. But that was then and this is now. And that's really the approach we want to take is be happy, be present. And there may be things that maybe we may not be as fast as we were before. We may not be able to lift as much anymore, but that's okay. We're not that same person. But that doesn't mean we still can't optimize where we're currently at and where we're trying to go.
Yeah. Well, I respect the heck out of you, and you've done so much for me over these last couple of years in coaching while we were on the road, sending me potential workouts that I could take part of, things that I could do while traveling. And when I came back and I put a lot of these things into action, that gradual buildup, I've currently been experiencing results that I've never had before in my life. Like I'm leaner than I've ever been. I'm stronger than I've ever been. I have definition in my arms. I don't quite look like the cover photo that we used for today's live stream. However, that's a future goal.
That's awesome, Danny. And you are the best that you are with what you've got. And that's something, for transparency, we obviously want to have a shocking photo. That photo I will share with you was of me quite a while ago when I was bodybuilding. And I say with bodybuilding, it's actually some of the most unhealthy time in your life because what you're going for is aesthetics. And the body fat percentage that you see there is not sustainable moving forward, but it makes for a good photo for a thumbnail. And so I always tell people, buyer beware. Sometimes when you see things online and you see a certain look, it doesn't mean that there's health behind that. But what I do say is you should have a goal for yourself and work towards that because what will happen is you might even surprise yourself. I think you have a very defined, very realistic goal, Danny, that personally I think you're going to blow through. I think you're going to find levels that you've never experienced, but you're doing it the right way and you have the right mindset and you have a strong why. And I challenge all the viewers to look at that and clearly define what do they want, not does what someone else want for them, not what someone might show you in a magazine or online and think, oh, I should look like that. That's the first step. And unfortunately, when you talk to a lot of people about getting in shape, they say, well, I just want to get in shape. And we talked about this, that getting in shape is actually not a goal. And even losing weight is not a goal, meaning that's a what. That's what you want to happen, but you need to figure out the why. And it's got to be deep. You have a very deep, personal, meaningful why, Danny. And that's what I already know will get you through the early workouts, the times when doubt sets in, the time where you don't want to wake up, the time, like it's inevitable. But that's a key component, and I'm actually glad you touched upon that, is a fancy picture might get you to start, but it's definitely not going to keep you going. And until you come to terms with who you are, where we're at, and what it means to you to be quote unquote in shape, it's going to be a yo-yo. You see a lot of people who, oh, I'm going to start this diet, and you come back and you run into them 6 months later, and it's like, well, what happened? Oh, well, this stuff doesn't work. I tried it or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, it's always something, right? But the folks that I know who've had lasting, sustainable fitness, although they wanted to quote unquote get in shape and lose weight, it's always been something deeper beyond that. And you've identified that, Danny. So kudos to you for your journey.
I appreciate that. And, speaking of the journey, we're going to go into the next part, which you're helping prepare me for, is to kind of keep this motivation going, continue to see progress. And you have this awesome app that you've built out a program for me. Go check out the previous episodes when we did discuss what my goals are and how we got to this point, because this week we're going to talk about building a proper fitness plan for you. And we're going to do that by using the example that you built out for me. So walk me through this app as I pull it up here. And as you can see, we are
Yeah.
training for a Spartan race. That's my lovely wife. And and here's our app. This is the Forefathers Fitness app, I believe, right?
Yeah, and it's available on Apple and Google Store. We actually have a lot of free resources available for anyone if they just download the app, that you don't have to be in one of our personal client coaching programs. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that you have to be a personal client coach under the program, which you are. And so this particular app is designed to help you track all the things that matter. Today, we're going to be focusing on the exercise portion, but it also allows you to track things like your water intake, nutrition, your macros, as well as some other things too, like your body fat and your weight. But for
Yes.
the workout program, that part is important because it allows you to track it. And when I mean track it, not just know what to do, but you can actually track your weights and your reps. And it's been shown that if you track anything you want to improve by just tracking or writing it down, you'll see a 30% bump in improvement. Whether it's your finances, whether it's your nutrition, your working out, don't just try to guess and wing it by thinking about what you want in your head. Even if you don't use the Forefathers Fitness 2.0 app, you should just grab a piece of paper and a pen, or use your note in your phone and plan what you write down what you plan to do, and then more importantly, after you've done it or didn't do it, log your results. And by going back and referencing those results each time you work out, you eliminate the opportunity for assumptions and doubt. Meaning, if you needed to lift 20 pounds doing a rep, doing let's say 10 reps, and in your head you come back next week and you're trying to do a little bit more than the 20 pounds and you forget what you lifted, you're going to fall victim to just lifting what you feel like. And that's a definite recipe for stagnation. So by going in and logging all the things that Danny is actually doing, you get good data in, you get good data out. I get to see what he's done. We can make adjustments if we need to go up or down. And the truth serum for him will be when he goes back and looks at the number of reps or the weights that he lifted, he'll know for sure where he left off. So if you left off at 10 reps at 20 pounds, it's probably reasonable that he should go up a little bit to maybe 22 or 25 pounds to continue getting growth out of that. So that's the important part of, you hear all these words, oh, we have an app for tracking. That's the main function of using an app, is actually helping you to be accountable to yourself for the actions you're doing.
That's awesome. Well, if you can, I'm gonna pull up the app here, and
Yeah,
I'm gonna go over like a little bit of what you had me do, and you can just kind of talk through it a little bit, and I'll call myself out on
sure.
some of the days that I felt like I was successful, and some of the days that I had a harder time. And we'll
Sounds
start at
good.
Monday. So like let's look at Monday here.
Okay. So
All right.
I can't see the app from my view, but I'll just talk through it because I have it memorized. And
All
so
right. Give me just a
if
second.
you're
Hold on, just a
okay,
second. I apologize. Sorry
no
for our
problem.
viewers. I'm working through this technical stuff. Here we go. All right, so it's right in between us, and I've got Monday. I've got the workouts as the first thing because that's where you have it, and then as you go down, you can see he's got a nutrition and activity level that includes water, steps, movement, energy, distances, and how much elevation we've traveled that day is kind of some of the stuff that we are tracking. And on Monday, he had me do an upper body workout. But that
Yeah.
day I
So up
also did an 8 mile run, and me and Leanne like to do some bouldering and rock climbing, so I have that workout in there as well. But let's start with your upper body.
Yeah, so let's talk about the upper body focus. So we want at minimum when we talk about resistance training. So resistance training is training with anything greater than, you know, basically putting resistance against your muscles in some way. comes in all different forms. But generally, you're lifting some type of weight or using your body as the resistance, okay? What we at minimum want is 3 days of resistance training. And we generally start at 3 days because that allows people to have a concentrated focus in 3 days as opposed to saying you have to break it up over five and run the risk of missing a day. We can definitely extend this out more days to 4 or 5 based on the client's preference. But with Danny, again, we were looking at really efficient time. He's very busy with his professional life and his podcast and other things. So what we don't want to have is him in the gym for 5 to 6 hours, and we don't want to have to drag this out for, 4 to 5 days. So we got 3 days. Day one is an upper body focus, and so when he clicks the app, it's going to take him in his dynamic warm up. So the first phase of this is about 5 to 10 minutes of dynamic stretching, arm circles, shoulder shrugs, neck rotations, followed by really light cardio like some jumping jacks, some high knees, just getting kind of the heart pumping and so forth. So the key with the dynamic stretching and the warm up is you're signaling the body that, hey, we're about to start working out. You don't really want to do static stretching where you're stretching and holding prior to a workout. Sometimes that can lead to injury. Static stretching is really best served after your workout. So the dynamic stretch is really just a little bit of a trigger to kind of get you in a running or a rolling start into the actual workout itself. The workout is comprised of what Danny has access to. So I take into account, where are you going to be working out? When are you going to be working out? How do you want to work out? For instance, I'm not going to program a ton of exercises at his gym if he's not going to be working out in the gym. So the exercises have to coincide with the equipment that he's told me he wants to use and he'll have regular access to. So in Danny's case, he has a suspension trainer, a TRX suspension trainer. He has dumbbells. I believe he has a bench. And then he also has some exercise or resistance bands. So those are the majority of how these of all the workouts have been planned. So for this particular workout, we are doing a dumbbell bench um, for the chest. We're doing dumbbell bench press, so he can lay on the bench or he can lay on the ground. And we're doing 3 sets of between 12 to 15 reps, having focus on controlled movements and avoid straining the shoulder. Because remember, that was another point that although he's getting a lot stronger in the shoulder, that's the one area we always want to keep an eye on and make sure we don't lose any ground with that.
Nice. Yeah. The workout for me, it was a little interesting because, as we were going through the different weights and stuff like that, I had done a workout on Monday night and kind of overexerted myself, just with some max reps. And as I as I was doing this upper body workout, I had realized, like, I started too heavy with my weights. I started with 30-pound weights, and realized very quickly after the second round, like, my form was starting to break down. And I had to end up just decreasing the weights in the second and third set, gradually, eventually ending at 20 pounds per exercise. Is that a common thing that we see, or do we want to kind of push ourselves to the next limit as we're going through these exercises?
That's an excellent question, is how much weight do we need to lift, right? And really what you're lifting for when you're exercising, the only reps that matter are those final 1 to 2 reps, because that's where your body will realize, I need to adapt and I need to grow. So when we hear 3 sets of 12 to 15 reps, those first 11 and 12 reps aren't actually growing your body. That's just maintaining what you have, because until you get to the point where you have to actually work hard to earn those 1 or 2 last reps, your body is basically doing what it is trained and able to do up until that point. So one way you can determine if in fact you're lifting the right amount of weight, it's called your 1 rep max. And so there's a calculation you can use, but it's a little convoluted. To me, a more practical way to do that is just start with a weight that you think you can lift, and this is how you can tell. When we say your rep range is 12 to 15, it's just that. It's a range, meaning you should get exerted and tired with the weight that you're lifting within that rep range for that set. So an example on how you can tell if you're lifting the right amount of weight, lifting too light or lifting too heavy, is it should sound or feel something like this. Let's say I'm doing a dumbbell bench press and I choose 30 pounds. Now I'm doing my reps, first rep, I'm at 10, and then from 10 until 13, it sounds like this: 10, 11, 12, 13. Right? I had to really work for that last rep, but it didn't break form or hurt my shoulder. That's what it should sound like. If I'm at 6 reps and I sound like this, 7, and I barely can get 7, it's too heavy. If I get to 13 and it's like 13, 14, 15, and I could have gone to 16 to 20, it's too light. So you really use the rep range as a guide, but you don't just stop because you're at that rep range. You have to then determine, could I have lifted more, could I have done more reps? And if so, you need to increase the rep. Or, like Danny said, which is a good observation, did I break my form and now I'm risking injury? Or was I only able to get 1 to 2 and maybe I'm ego lifting? In his case, it sounds like he was maybe 5 pounds off where he needed to be. And all he had to do for the subsequent set is drop down by 5 pounds to get back to where you need to be. Now, once you've got that baseline, you're going to continue to push yourself in that range because that's what's called progressive overload. So as you get stronger, your body will adapt. And what worked for you 2 to 3 weeks ago is now going to not be heavy enough. So you will have to adjust by weight and go up. Doesn't mean you're going to go up by increments of 10 or 20. Sometimes it just might be 2.5 or 5 pounds to really put that additional load where you need it. So great question.
Yeah, no. I think it's a question that a lot of us have is like, how do I know how much is too much, or how do I know where to start? I know I've had that question a lot. Like, I still have a hard time understanding where to start when it comes to weights and bands and like how much body weight. And so, knowing like we want to push ourselves, but not necessarily to complete failure where our form is breaking down. But it should
Yeah.
feel like a strain on those last couple reps is super helpful.
Yeah, listen to that your very first set of any program is like your calibration set. So don't be too frustrated if it's too heavy or too light. Make the adjustments based off of that very first set and then record them in your app. And then you'll have a pretty good baseline to work with, as far as where your next sets and weights should be.
And you've built out. I'm gonna just bring up the phone real quick. I'm gonna talk a little bit about this because I had some questions during my week. When we're building out these programs for ourselves, or having a coach build it for us, or we're going into a magazine or finding an online program, what are some of the things that we really should consider beyond just like our physical capabilities? Like how do we go and structure like, oh, upper body, cardio, lower body, push, pull, press, squat, like those types of things. Like how do we make smart decisions so that
Yeah.
we don't end up overloading ourselves and ending up injured by the end of the week, or just so fatigued that we don't want to carry on?
Keep it simple. 3, 2, 1. You only need to work out 3 days a week, and there's 3 portions. So you can remember push, pull, push movements, pull movements, and lower body. Your particular workout, Danny, is a composition of upper body, lower body, and then combo, specific to you wanting to increase your metabolic conditioning. So yours is really customized to you. But if you were looking for some generic guidance that could apply in most situations, then a push push situation where you're doing chest and tris, a pull day where you're doing back and bis, and then a leg day lower body. And then the two, so that's 3 days of lifting broken out for you in simple form. The number two comes from 2 days of recovery between a body part. So it doesn't mean you can't be in the gym every day, but you need to give your body at minimum at least 2 days in between working an individual body part before working that body part again. There are some minor exceptions, such as your abs, your core, and like maybe your forearms. But for the most part, large muscle groups like biceps, triceps, um, back and bis, you want to give that particular muscle at least 2 to 3 days to rest in between. Mainly because you don't grow from the workout, you grow from the recovery between your workouts that the workout triggers your body to need to adapt to. And so the one then comes down to just focusing on that one body part while you're working it. So what I mean by that is you can do what are called compound movements where you're trying to say, hey, am I hitting 2 or 3 body parts during this workout? But generally, if you're just beginning, just try to focus on that one body part for that exercise. So if you're doing legs and you're thinking about doing maybe a squat, that's a compound movement. You're going to be doing a lot of other body parts during that time. But I would advise someone who's new to do a single movement for your legs, meaning a leg lift or a leg extension or something where you can really identify the individual muscle being worked as being isolated. So that's why I say keep it simple, 3, 2, 1. 3 days broken up over 3 parts, 2 days of rest in between, and one body part at a time.
I like it. Well, back to our program, and it's really important. Leanne had mentioned that she likes your term ego lifting because like we always try to go back to where we left off, and sometimes if our break has been so long, we have to work ourselves back up to it. What I've noticed though about like our muscles is that they have a memory to them, so they quickly get back to where they're at, but not if we just shock them right there. Has been my
You're right.
experience at least.
That's
But
100% correct.
so with this fitness program, I shared with you yesterday when we met in person at Big Tire that I did end up missing one day of workout because my schedule had changed. Unfortunately, it's like the dreaded, the quote unquote dreaded leg day or lower body focus. I don't like to skip it because I do like running, and I need to strengthen as many muscles as I can. My hip flexors, my lower body, get good deep lunges in there. But because I had work that started at 1 a.m., it really threw off my schedule. It threw off my diet. I mean, this day I was about 700 calories short. I did get in a 30-minute jog, but I did not have the time or energy for the lower body workout. What do we do in instances like that?
So the first step is if you miss it, don't guilt yourself out of it, all right? But then don't do it 2 days in a row. So you can do a makeup exercise the next day. So even if you were doing, let's say, a different body part, the sooner you can get in there and make that exercise up, the better. And then definitely don't let 2 days pass of something. Things do come up, right? But I always think, okay, well, what's your contingency plan? So you bring up a good point because when you and I do our weekly debrief, we're going to talk about that. And what we were looking for there is just to help understand how come, what were the circumstances around you missing that workout? And if there is something we can change around either the time you want to work out or maybe switching that particular set of muscles to a different day because maybe now you've got this standing weekly meeting, we're going to try to address it. If it just comes down to everything was fine, we don't have to change anything, it was just a missed day, then it's back to what I said initially. Make it up as soon as possible, but don't try to miss more than one in a row, right? And so the goal with this is consistently good. So you got a 20% buffer for grace, meaning if you need to do 10 things perfect in a week, just do 8 of the 10 consistently, and that will be better than occasionally doing them always perfect. So at some point, you'll have to just let that go and say, yep, would have been nice, didn't happen. Let's just not let it happen again or have a backup plan for it, and then we'll move forward.
I love that, and I appreciate that, like having grace with ourselves when we miss things because days do get away from us. Life actually happens. Emergencies happen. Family comes in town. There's a dinner party that we didn't account for, or a work emergency that we have to adjust our own schedules for and be okay being out of it for a moment. Um, you know, I hope our listeners and our viewers have gotten quite a bit out of your tips throughout this particular discussion. Next week, I know we're going to talk about the nutrition plan, so we're going to talk about hydration and food, but just as kind of, I've been logging my food, and there's been a few days where I've been over, but mostly I've been under pretty consistently. Is that a bad thing, or how should I go about thinking about that as I approach this week and my nutrition goals?
When you mean under, is it under logging it or under your macro count, or what's your under there?
So I'm gonna bring it up real quick. So on Monday, I had noticed, because for the last year or so, I've set my calorie goals around 1,800 to 2,200 calories. Like that's been my range. You set me at 2,500 for the activities that I'm doing, and I completely understand it. But Monday, I came under at 2,000, so I missed it by 500. But then on Thursday, I went over by almost 500,
So
just because
on the
of
calories,
circumstances.
yeah. So on the calories, and we're going to be talking about that part next because we layer everything in. So even though that app says calories, what's important is where are the calories coming from. And so it's when we look at the overall picture, we're actually going to be moving away from a calorie target because that's kind of a long-term failed strategy. What we're going to be doing is prioritizing protein and focusing on overall macronutrition for you. And so it'll be very simple because although the app doesn't give you much leeway to put, it does track everything by a caloric expenditure, which is okay. But what we're really focused in on is the quality of food that you're eating. Make sure you're hitting your protein targets because if you hit your caloric targets but didn't have enough protein, let's say all these calories came from carbs or fat, you're not going to get the same results as if we got you the amount of protein you need first and then got the other macros in there as well. So that's why with the tracking right now for the app, we're more so looking at how much are you getting in the way of your protein. Then we're figuring out what does that look like as far as the form. Where's that coming from? Food? Do we need to supplement? And then from there we can look at, okay, of all the foods you like, here's a good list and here's a not so good list, and then you get to choose from there. So there will be a situation where you might eat a little more than what you had been eating before, but it's going to be focused on the nutritional value of the food as opposed to just saying we're trying for a caloric deficit or we're trying for a specific caloric target.
Awesome. I really appreciate that because that gives me a lot of insight to consider. And, I know our listeners are really interested in learning a lot more about the nutrition that we're going to talk about next week to include water intake because I have some questions because I've been playing around with that this last year, especially in endurance training, and just what my personal experiences have been based off of what I know is kind of good nutrition according to experts and stuff like that. So I have questions around that. I encourage anybody that is, interested in these nutrition and fitness subjects to please join in, ask questions, send me your questions. I will make sure that Alim gets them ahead of time as well. So that we can really form the discussion around questions that you all have as well. Like this may be my journey, but I want us all to be able to learn and grow from it. And I know Alim really wants you all to also learn and grow from it. So before we head out, Alim, is there anything else that you wanted to say? And as you can see, like our viewers are really, interested in the nutrition, like protein and carbohydrates and fats and stuff like that. So I think that's going to be a great discussion for next week because it's something that
Yeah,
I struggle with as well.
absolutely. The nutrition part is probably the most important part of this. And so it's kind of a cool journey because we layer everything in. We don't throw everything in week one. By week three is when people are now a little bit dialed in with what they need to do from a logistics standpoint. But then the real cerebral part kind of comes into place with nutrition because I say cerebral not because it's hard, but it's going to throw a lot of the things that we've been taught and actually lied to growing up about nutrition and what that means, and that it doesn't have to be as complicated, it doesn't have to be expensive, and you don't have to suffer and starve yourself. But when we look at that, we'll look at that next week and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And really, the main thing you'll hear from a lot of people is I'm working out, but I'm not feeling it. I'm not seeing gains, or I'm not gaining muscle or losing fat. And then they're doing all the work anyway. That's where the saying, you can't outwork a bad diet, comes into place. And a lot of times on paper, people's diet is not bad. I'm not saying these people are eating like ice cream and donuts, but they're simply not putting in the right nutritional inputs that their particular body needs. And more to come on that.
You just mentioned ice cream and donuts. Well, I did have ice cream last night. It was delicious.
It's
Uh,
okay. Enjoy it. Yeah. Have That's your 20% grace, my friend. Yeah.
Oh, hold on. I'm getting a word from Leanne. Leanne's trying to whisper softly over here real quick. What's up?
I was saying you did choose the non-dairy option.
Oh,
So
I did
go
choose
ahead.
the non-dairy option, is what she said.
And hey, enjoy it. People ask me that all the time. Can I have desserts? Can I have? Enjoy it. If you have a beer, make yourself happy. Remember, you've got a 20% buffer for that consistently good component. Having one thing of ice cream is definitely not going to derail you. Having 4 tubs of ice cream 3 days in a row, eh, might give you some challenges. But right, it's life. You want to balance this and be practical and don't be this weirdo all over the place. Okay, so a piece of pizza, some ice cream. I tell people have that because this is actually what's going to happen. This is just to get you through the initial rough spots. What will happen is that the day you missed in the gym will go from, oh, I missed the day in the gym and I feel like I need to make it up, to I'm so consistent in the gym and I'm performing at such a high level that I now know when I don't get my workout in, and internally you'll be driven to make sure it's a non-negotiable only because now you feel it when you don't work out. And that's what it gets to. So that's why I just want to get people to that point. Same thing will happen with your diet is right now you're actually associating it with a little bit of like dopamine hit, a little bit of satisfaction. But you'll actually get to a point where you're so optimized where you'll actually feel de-optimized by eating it. And then you'll be like, oh, now it's not as fun as I thought it was before. I'm going to back away from it. But we just need to get you and everyone else to that point, and the rest will take care of itself. But in the meantime, we don't want to deprive people and make them feel guilty and shame them or do any of that crazy stuff. So that's why it's a sliding scale, right? And I know for a fact it'll take care of itself along the way. So my goal is just to get you to that tipping point where now it goes from ice cream fun to ice cream not so fun. And that'll happen internally, and then you'll reprogram and everything will be good.
I appreciate that. I really do. If anybody has any questions, now is the time to ask because we are going to end up. I just realized I'm not on the stage. We are going to end up wrapping up this conversation, and we want to make sure that you have a chance to ask any questions that you do have. And again, if you're catching this non-live, please feel free to submit your questions to me through the DMs, Facebook Messenger, or you can email me at danny@onemileoneveteran.com. Look forward to hearing from you and having Coach Alim come with his extensive knowledge and experience in this realm. So thank you all for joining us. I'm not seeing any questions come up. Looking, letting the live stream catch up, and thank you all so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. Gotta finish. How do I close out? Ending a live stream is always this fun thing. Here we go. And live and finish.